Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Psychedelic Vantage. Today, I am speaking with Joël Brierre, who is the founder and CEO of the psychedelic wellness companies Kaivalya Kollectiv and Tandava Retreats, as well as co-founder of the 5-MeO DMT education and training platform, F.I.V.E, F-I-V-E. Joel has been a leader in the modern psychedelic movement, specifically in the realm of 5-MeO DMT and the Bufo Alvarius toad, and has spent years helping to create safe and effective protocols around this molecule. With a passion for preparation and integration protocols, Joel and his team are involved in everything from clinical research and trainings to experiential retreats in Mexico and Jamaica. So when it comes to 5-MeO DMT, it really seems like we know far less about the psychedelic when compared to psilocybin and LSD, for example, which has been studied, much more. That's why I'm really excited, Joel, to be speaking with you today to learn more about 5-MeO DMT, your work that you do around 5-MeO DMT, the potential benefits and risks associated with the use of the psychedelic, and if we are ready to have a potential 5-MeO DMT treatment for depression integrated into our medical system. I'm sure you saw the GH research data, which we could also speak on later in
Yeah,
this interview. But with that being said, how are you doing, Joel?
I'm doing great, Jake. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, it's really great to have you on the channel, and thank you.
Mhm.
So what inspired you to work in the psychedelic medicine space?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. My background, I'm from Washington, D.C. originally. My father's an immigrant from Haiti, and my mother came from New York. And I was introduced to these psychedelic medicines very early on, got really into them in the 90s as a teenager, and was really into some big high dose experiences. And years later, ended up getting into yoga and meditation, and really found a lot of my self development through those lenses. And then was reintroduced to psychedelics and plant medicines, and that's kind of where I found myself as a medicine facilitator. Years later, I was fortunate enough to study under some amazing teachers around the world, and initially started holding retreats in 2011, and really enjoyed the multi-day context because we can get people out of their known world and into the extraordinary world where real change can happen. In the mid 2010s, started seeing a shift in demographic. A lot more people seeking us out for significant mental health crisis, who may have less understandings of philosophical and spiritual frameworks that were kind of present in those kind of retreats then. And that was a big invitation for us to enhance our team, enhance our skill sets, and get ready to receive the type of demographic that was starting to come down here, or to Jamaica or everywhere else we were holding them. And then the fun adventure had been getting to understand how to make this a sustainable business. I wanted to have a full-time center where people could feel safe, that had a medical staff, that required capital investment, that required getting to understand how to create a sustainable and thriving business model. And so it's been a whole hero's journey in of itself, but has been absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much for that background. And I'm glad you brought up the people that you've worked with and why they might be wanting to use 5-MeO DMT at, let's say, one of the retreats you have. Like, what are the reasons people come in to use 5-MeO DMT with the people that your retreats see?
Yeah, good question. We're a bit of an outlier amongst our colleagues who serve 5-MeO. I'd say the majority of participants coming here to Tandava are first timers to psychedelics altogether. They're people who have been in therapy for 30 years, tried every SSRI and every SNRI, and have hit a wall. And this is kind of their last try of something. So we deal with a lot of significantly heavy cases. We engage in a kind of work that is so outside of the comfort zone and the known worlds of so many of our participants that it's a really beautiful, beautiful big shift we get to witness every time we receive people. So we deal with, hardcore PTSD, a lot of survivors of sexual trauma, combat veterans. We work a lot with clinical depression, both treatment resistant, major depressive disorder, quite a few people coming in for substance abuse disorder, a lot
Mm.
of generalized anxiety as well. And then we also have people coming in for self-discovery, connection,
Mm.
exploration, or really even better, looking to optimize the way they're experiencing their life. And so this is an infinite medicine with an infinite amount of conditions and ways we can take it.
So, before I actually ask you about what the subjective effects of 5-MeO DMT are like, I'm curious to know what type of ways do people take the 5-MeO DMT? Is it through inhaling it, or is there many different ways that it could be done?
Quite a few different ways that it can be done, as we do work with the pure molecule, synthetically made rather than the bufotoxin. We can utilize it through freebase, and we have a device that's made specifically for pure 5-MeO that creates an oxygen-free chamber using argon gas and a heating element that heats to the exact vaporizing temperature of pure 5-MeO, and it creates or allows for a flawless administration. So I've worked with end-of-life patients who can't inhale any smoke, and this device works for them, which is beautiful. We also work with it in pens for very low doses. We
Mm.
also have different routes of administration. Utilizing it in its HCl form or salt form can be taken sublingually. In its freebase form, we can take it intranasally, as pioneered by Dr. Ralph Metzner and his students. And we've also got suppositories. Obviously, they would
Wow.
administer that part themselves.
Yeah.
But those other ROAs, they allow for a slower onset rather than that immediate
Mm.
kind of take on. It's
Yeah.
a 4 to 8 minute come up and a bit of an elongated, stretched out experience.
And I'm really actually excited later in the interview to speak about more in depth, I guess, the different routes of administration, especially because, as you
Yeah.
know, I follow the drug development space, and at least when I look at Beckley SciTech and GH Research, it seems, and I'd like to learn more from you later, that the way it's administered, it could almost completely change what the experience is like. So,
100%.
really interested to learn about that. So, um, yeah, like what does the journey, look like with someone taking 5-MeO DMT at, let's say, Tandava retreats where you're at? And yeah, what does that look like? How long do they stay there for? And yeah,
So
preparation, integration.
how we work here at Tandava, it's a 7 week process with them being on site for 5 days. So actually, it may be a bit longer than that. We really consider the container commencing during the discovery call. First point of contact, when someone reaches out to us to ask questions or see if this is a good fit for them and vice versa. That's really where we're able to start creating a sense of rapport and a sense of trust with them, allowing them to feel safe. And then we do a few weeks of private and individual preparation work with them via Zoom, where we're getting to know them, getting to understand what are they looking to get out of all this? What is their history like with trauma, with depression? What parts of their patterning are they looking to work into? What potential roadblocks we might hit? What kind of resistance or challenges from the deeper parts of the subconscious may be expected during their process? And really allowing them and giving them a sense of safety as much as humanly possible. You know, with 5-MeO, this is an experience that very often results in a sense of dissolving away into subjective void. And the last thing a mind thinks before it fully dissolves away is, am I in a safe place to give up control? Am I in a safe place to be able to just completely lose it? And for those few weeks leading up to that moment, it's up to us as facilitators to make sure that that's a yes when that comes up for them. The 5-MeO experience is fast, but it comes on instantly. And so after a few weeks of preparatory work, our sessions are done privately here and one at a time. It's the participant and two facilitators, generally a male and a female facilitator. And we're not trying to interfere with their experience. We're not trying to alter their experience. We're just trying to create a safe space.
Yeah.
And so how people experience it is a very, very wide spectrum. Some people may just lay there. Some people may go into what looks like a seizure or an exorcism and
Mhm.
become extremely physically dynamic. So there's really a full spectrum of how it can appear. And for us, it's just about keeping them safe. And then with 5-MeO, you know, the thing is, unlike all other psychedelics with mushrooms or ayahuasca, I've got hours of subjective experience that's reflected in symbolism to unpack. You know, we understand that the psyche speaks to us in symbolism. And with those other medicines, we've got something to really work with. With 5-MeO, this is a 10 to 30 minute, completely ineffable experience where there's often not even a real memory of the experience. And so then it's about engaging with that opening that's been created, because 5-MeO by all means reopens or opens a very, very deep doorway or window to the deepest parts of the psyche. And from there, we can open up to deep traumas, to troubling memories, to different things that can then begin to be released. But as they're being released, they need to be acknowledged first. And so very often, people may go through a full spectrum of either extremely blissful emotions to deep sadness to anger and rage, maybe the full spectrum of the grief process, whatever it may be. But it's a very unique experience to each participant.
Thank you so much for that really great breakdown. I'd like to ask you, is there, I feel like at least with maybe psilocybin and even ibogaine, there's really like sometimes for a lot of people, there's a narrative that goes
Yeah.
on for them during the experience. Maybe they're revisiting certain memories.
Hmm.
And what I've heard, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, with 5-MeO DMT, it's more just an extremely intense feeling. Is that a correct way of describing it, or what am I missing here?
Somewhat, it's a tough one when it comes to the ineffable because language cannot describe it. Our minds can't really conceive. This is an experience that can only happen when there is a cessation of self-activity. And so the structure of self utilizing language really has no bearings there. And so, rather than just like you said, with other medicines, there is this kind of journey where I may undergo a narrative, getting to experience a story. But with 5-MeO, without that sense of I there, it's quite different if there's not a sense of me here to be able to witness. So
Yeah.
rather, it is this ineffable experience it's beyond what we're seeing or what we're hearing. It's not that it's not visual or not auditory. It's more so that it's beyond the external senses and into something that is far more indescribable. But sometimes there is a narrative. Sometimes it is taking us right to a trauma. So we've had people experience early traumas where there was no memory previously. We've had participants go into prenatal trauma. One participant we worked with a few months ago, actually, he found out in this experience that he went through an experience during birth where he was being choked by the umbilical cord, and the doctor had to rectify this. He had no idea, but he ended up calling his mother afterwards, and she confirmed this. But sometimes it will take us to a bit of a narrative or story to be able to kind of purge out the bindings or the gripping of those traumatic experiences from the connective tissue, from the psyche, etc.
That's incredible. And when you were speaking about letting go, that really, at least, I've only tried in my life, high doses of psilocybin, LSD. It's been a while actually. But the challenging experiences for me, and they were, some of the most challenging experiences of my life by far, actually. When things went wrong for me sometimes, and I think other people can relate, is when you don't let go in the experience and you're fighting it.
Yeah.
Now, with 5-MeO DMT, do you even have the choice of letting go or not? Like, because I remember at least and again, I think a lot of people were listening, like you could feel like you're dying on psilocybin potentially, but you could resist it, like in a
Yeah.
sense, like with 5-MeO, could you even resist that?
You can try. It's not going to be fun.
Yeah,
There's it's
yeah,
I mean, definitely people can resist and fight this experience tooth and nail. And what that can look like often, so some degree of resistance can be expected, and that's fine. If we're working with trained facilitators and specialists that know how to hold that process, that's all good. But, let's say I'm in the States somewhere and there's an underground practitioner coming through, or let's say I'm going to a clinical trial that may not involve any preparation or therapy with it. And I may not have any idea of the philosophical notion that one can dissolve away and there is a base layer of consciousness that we can merge into. That might not be a part of my understanding or belief system. And all of a sudden, I take a substance where I begin just dissolving away. And our mind can understand the idea, of the ego death or ego dissolution, But when it actually goes down and we haven't been given any resources, all of a sudden, maybe my mind's like, holy shit, I just took a substance and now it's killing me. If I
Yeah.
don't hold on for dear life, I'm never going to come back. Or if I don't hold on for dear life, I'm going to die.
Yep.
And so then I fight that experience and hold on and do everything to keep myself present here. What that can do is just like a traumatic experience, the brain can get stuck in that experience and it will continually try and complete itself. And this is where you hear about those unmanageable reactivations, where people are going in day and night. This can last for weeks or even months, where they are going into full 5-MeO experiences. And it feels like going into full death or going into hell realms for some people. And so the challenging experience, if participants are giving resources and support to dive into it, this can be the most beautiful thing ever. Facing our deepest fears, going into what can be the most confrontational moment in a human's life. But if we're not given resources for it, if we're not in a container that is created to hold this kind of experience, then that may be one of the most traumatic experiences I ever go into.
So I'm really glad you're bringing this up, what you just said, because at least from the people I've spoken with and just reading up on different trip reports as well, I've been curious and went on Reddit to look at what people say. And again, reading about it, speaking with psychonauts, it seems that when things go well with a 5-MeO DMT experience, that it has the most transformational effects, even when compared, more so than any other psychedelic. At least that's
Oh yeah.
my read on it. When things go
Yeah.
right, it's really indescribable how transformational it can be. But it also seems like on the other side of things, when things don't go right, and like you said, you're not in a safe container, you're not prepared, that it could be, like you just said, one of the most traumatic experiences. So, well, first, do you agree with that? And second, like, I guess, what are the ways to deal with like, do people ever come to you after they've had a challenging experience, let's say by themselves, like not even at one of your retreats, and they come to you, like, how does one work with that? What helps people who have had these experiences?
That's a great question. Kind of early on, myself and a lot of my team kind of became the go-to for people who may have had a challenging or unsafe experience elsewhere in the world to kind of reach out to. We inadvertently kind of were the 5-MeO police for a little while, not
Hmm.
really wanting to be,
Yeah.
but this is a medicine that we really believe in. And in the mid 2010s, we started seeing a lot of awful things happening with wild underground practitioners in very unsafe containers. Then started seeing similar things happen with some of the drug development companies that were approaching 5-MeO without a lot of knowledge of what they were getting into. And for us, what we don't want to see is another headline like Spanish porn star kills friend with toad venom or something like
Yeah.
that. It's information is really important right now. And
Yep.
so very often people do reach out to us having been traumatized by one of their experiences elsewhere. And luckily, and thanking my amazingly skilled team, that can usually be sorted out with a few integration sessions. This experience generally still lives within the body. It lives within the deeper layers of the psyche, and it can be accessed and worked with through various practices. So anywhere between 1 and 4 integration sessions with a skilled, informed practitioner is usually going to help clear that right up. And what's on the other end of those traumatic experiences is usually a huge expansion, a huge opening. But in life, there's always contractions before there are expansions. And if we go into an experience and we do not have the resources or support to make it through that bottleneck of challenge, then we may get stuck in there. And what Stanislav Grof referred to as coex systems. Usually we might not even be aware of what the challenge was or why it was so scary, because it's a compound of so many different patterns and experiences of our life that are somehow related and connected, that are now trying to be moved out but are stuck in this little thin area. And it can be extremely debilitating. And so the integration process cannot be underestimated. The integration process is how we take a challenging experience and reap extreme benefits from it versus a challenging experience becoming a traumatic experience.
Mhm.
And so those are two very, very different things.
Joel, how many other people in the world would you guess have as much experience as you and your team with facilitating 5-MeO DMT experiences?
Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. I would say the ones that are more experienced than me with facilitation are many of my mentors and are still working in the underground. But when it comes to experience, we've been lucky enough to be kind of taken under the wing of some of the OG practitioners that really helped pioneer this medicine, get it out to the world decades ago. And from these underground groups, we were given the basis of best practices and how we can engage in this safely. But I would say operating above ground, I don't know if there's anyone as experienced as my team. And that kind of sounds like bragging, but
No, I mean, it sounds about right to me. I mean, and also I will say it seems that with 5-MeO DMT, um, there's I've heard some really bad stories about some facilitators in the space, more so than other psychedelics, and I've only heard really good things about you and the work you do. Um, and actually, again, the reason why it didn't surprise me why there's maybe so few people out there who have so much experience facilitating these experiences is because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I saw a video where you had this brilliant I think neuroscience PhD student, and she stated, I think that only 1 in 33,000 people have tried 5-MeO DMT.
yeah.
Do you anticipate that this rate of use will stay the same, or will it go up? You think so?
No, I think there was a lot of excitement for a while around psilocybin and ketamine, etc.
Yeah.
I think we've been finding over and over and over again that the current, I would say, realm of ketamine treatment is just not that effective. Most of our participants that come here, if they've tried anything, it's been ketamine clinic treatment, and may have experienced a couple weeks of relief, but generally not long lasting. And there's a lot of more embracing the small molecules right now, the short acting molecules, which is
Yeah.
beautiful. There is a lot of promise there right now, in my opinion. And I think this has been echoed for years from some of the other researchers, that at the end of the day, I think 5-MeO DMT and ibogaine are going to show the most promise moving forward, and are going to start to get a lot more attention. I think 5-MeO is right around the corner from seeing its kind of, what happened with ayahuasca tourism years ago. What's happening with ibogaine now. It's the more and more public knowledge gets out there, the more people are going to be flocking to it. I mean, the numbers in our trainings and retreats have steadily been increasing. And so it's getting there. And I think that's also why there is such a need for safety and best practices right now, so people can have a chance to work with this beautiful experience without having to suffer the consequences of an unheld container.
So I think you actually did state that you have spoken with some companies to maybe give advice. Is there any chance you could go into more detail of what some of these conversations have looked like?
Yeah. I'm not going to use any names, but I have done
No,
some
yeah.
consulting and some advising for some of the development companies focused on 5-MeO. What I've come to find is, you know, they're all new to this. They're all new
Okay.
to 5-MeO. And unfortunately, the tough thing here is when it comes to, I'm being very cautious with my words right now. Let's just say that there's not a lot of solid understanding and support present right now.
Okay.
And our hopes are that these do not reflect out in phase 3 trials when they start to get to bigger
Yeah.
bodies of test subjects. Those of us who have a lot of experience, and I mean, I've served over 2,000 people in my life, this medicine, and getting to understand the subtle nuances and the not so subtle nuances of it. There's a lot of red flags we've seen come up
Hmm.
that are not as obvious to someone who may not know the intricacies of 5-MeO DMT. And so I have stepped back from doing advising and consulting a while ago, more simply because of conflict of interest. We do have our own drug discovery and drug development moves that we've been moving very quietly. But I hope that none of these companies fail. I hope that none of these companies end up harming someone that goes to hurt the reputation further of 5-MeO DMT. But I would say, from what I've seen, there are significant risks to say that it's a great possibility that it does happen.
Hmm. And now, this is a very debated question in the psychedelic medicine space that I'm about to ask you. Get ready for this one, and I'm sure you've been asked it. Does someone, usually the question actually is posed, does someone need prior experience with psychedelics in order to be a good facilitator? But considering 5-MeO DMT seems to be so much different than other psychedelics, the way I'm going to pose it to you is, does someone need prior experience with 5-MeO DMT in order to be a good facilitator with 5-MeO DMT? What do you think?
Absolutely, 100%. Not only will that help the participant get the most out of their experience,
Okay.
but that's also going to go towards harm reduction as well. 5-MeO is a pretty extreme experience, and a lot of both what the experience can look like while on the molecule, but also through the integration process can look like emergency type of things, can look like extreme destabilization. If someone doesn't understand how to hold that kind of extreme process without pathologizing it, they're going to have a big issue and may really compound a participant's experience into something far less desirable than they were hoping for. And we've seen this happen a lot. We've had a lot of people come to me where they've gone and done an underground 5-MeO ceremony and had their psychotherapist helping them with integration. However, a lot of modern psychotherapy does involve pathologizing and attempting to identify something and give it a diagnosis.
Mhm.
5-MeO is something that kind of stands in stark comparison to that, and really requires nuance, really requires curiosity rather than trying to fix something. People may have extreme emotional symptoms come up or psychological symptoms come up where your basic psychologist or therapist, their first inclination is going to be to try and fix it, to try and suppress that symptom. However, if we can approach it with curiosity and get to see where it's coming from, there we can make huge strides. And so I would say, on our team, both through Tandava and through F.I.V.E, we don't hire anyone who's not already quite very experienced with 5-MeO. We've had a lot of clinicians and mental health professionals try and join our training program through
Yes.
F.I.V.E without any experience. And then when we let them know, like, hey, we're going to need to see some experience under your belt first before trying to step into service with this, they say, oh, but I'm already a clinician. I've already done this type of training. I even did, psychedelic therapy training with CIIS. Awesome. That's beautiful. Really happy for you. However, the majority of our students are mental health professionals, MDs as well, and clinicians, and get to learn a whole lot of new things. And a lot of what we teach is very new territory for a lot of them. And so I think personal experience with 5-MeO is definitely required to not harm our own participants, I'll just say.
No, that definitely makes sense. That definitely makes sense. I guess, yeah, it's interesting when I listen to some CEOs of many companies in the psychedelic space. Understandably, they're in the business of trying to create a treatment for depression.
Yeah.
But when you think about like the future, if a drug is approved, it's in the medical world, and it's just looked at as a depression treatment, then someone comes into an experience and some of their core beliefs might be challenged.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I'll just share, at least it's not 5-MeO DMT, but with psilocybin in the past, I had some of my, really core beliefs challenged as to like how I viewed a higher power. I was previously someone who, I think in the back of my mind, I thought that there was a God above us who like intervenes in our day-to-day lives and protects us. And during the experience, I was like, no, that at least my truth was that's probably not the case. Like, there's no rule in life saying that nothing bad can happen to you. Like anything
Yeah.
bad can happen. God's not going to stop it. Unfortunately, like that was my truth. Like in the future, does there need to be some sort of spiritual framework for these experiences, or at least like learning how to hold space for that? Like,
That's a good question. It's something that we've learned since the mid 2010s is something that is really required for this is understanding the experience through as many lenses as we can so it can be communicated to different people in different ways.
okay,
Some people are going to be very comfortable with it being communicated as a spiritual experience. Some
okay,
people may be suffering from religious trauma or cult trauma and be very adverse to that, or just identify as a rational skeptic. And so, through that, we can use the lens of quantum physics, we can use the lens of quantum mechanics, we can describe it as logically as we can. But yes, there does need to be some sort of framework. Very often we'll use Joseph Campbell's hero's journey as a framework to express the entire geography to our participants because it doesn't require a belief system in a certain area. It doesn't require a sense of faith in a higher power. It's something that can meet people where they're at. But when someone has an ineffable experience like that, they do need some sort of geography, some sort of framework, more than, oh, that was your 5-HT1A receptor. That can feel like unity. And so this is a deeply moving and profound experience. Just like you said, many people find their own faith in question after it. We've had people of, very, very strong faith completely lose their connection to their religion or have it completely
wow,
reshaped. And that's something that they may not have been looking for to happen. And so
yeah,
that can be extremely disconcerting when our entire worldview is getting shaken up like that.
yeah. I mean, it's just, it's a lot, and I can't even imagine what it feels like on 5-MeO DMT. But like you said, even in those challenging experiences, there's room for growth.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to move on to this topic here. I saw that um, Tandava, in conjunction, I think, with Imperial College London, did what was it, an EEG study on the brain of people undergoing a 5-MeO DMT experience? Is that correct?
So we advised Imperial College London on their EEG study with Beckley's proprietary nasal spray.
Okay.
But Imperial had a researcher down here along with University College of London where we did the first EEG study and the peak experience. So yeah, we took, I think it was about 32 participants down here over a few weeks and plugged them in and gave them full doses of 5-MeO to see what happens. And it's been fun and exciting.
Wow, that's incredible. Have those results been like shared or with?
So they're continually being analyzed. It's a ton of raw data to get through. The
Okay.
first research paper on it is going through review right now. One of the really interesting things that they're finding is that contrary to what most neuroscientists are taught in school, lower brainwave activity or less brain activity does not equate to less subjective experience or being asleep. What they found is people can have the most profound and intense experience of their life while showing minimal activity there. And so there's a lot of mysteries that we're excited about this unlocking.
No, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. So I guess now, I'd really love to speak with you about, first of all, I'm sure you saw the recent results from GH Research and Treatment Resistant Depression with their 5-MeO DMT candidate. And I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners have already seen the data. So I guess first, what were your thoughts on the data, and how do you feel about there being no mandated psychotherapy in those trials?
You know, on one hand, it is great when 5-MeO gets great headlines, gets us more attention, it gets the molecule more out there to the world. On the other hand, we see some major red flags here. And anyone who is experienced with 5-MeO DMT, any person who has served this medicine or been involved in the integration and therapeutic processes will say the same. And I understand why they're doing it. we can call it what it is. This is a company that was created to sell to pharma. That's the goal of having no therapeutic protocols attached. And I get it. As a business model, that's a great way to go about it. However, unfortunately, there is not a lot of informed intelligence that went into that beyond an algorithm saying that this was going to be the most viable business model. Because anyone who's experienced and has been out on the field knows that this is extremely dangerous. We've got numerous case studies on people who have been hospitalized, it's led to suicide, a lot of serious adverse events when there's been a lack of preparation and or integration. A lot of these readouts were at day 8, talking about a lot of people being in remission by day 8. Sweet, that glow period's going to last a couple weeks. I think the average state of neuroplasticity is 36 days with 5-MeO, and that kind of equates to that glowing period that we feel where there is that cessation. However, after that period of time, the default will usually start to creep back. And I'm trying to remember what it was after 6 months. But even at day 8, I think they were saying 57.5% of participants were in remission by day 8. That's not stellar numbers. For any of us who are experienced in the field, we can show numbers that will dwarf this by a long shot. And so seeing that almost half of the people, or a little more than half of the people, were in remission by day 8 shows that, yes, I understand that getting this into a business model that is quickly saleable and makes more sense to the FDA is a way to go. But for those of us that didn't form these businesses just to form a business, we formed these structures because we believe in this molecule and we really want to see it do what it can do. We're really about benefit optimization as well as harm reduction. And so I would love to see those numbers compared with participants who have received preparation beforehand and do receive intelligent integration process afterwards. I'd say I think, what did they said 18 participants discontinued during the clinical trials. I want to know why. They say 1, due to an adverse event, and they didn't list, what the adverse event was because they considered it moderate and not extreme.
Okay.
I want to know what they are considering extreme. I want to know why the other 17% or 17 participants discontinued the trial. Obviously, there can be logistic issues, things like this. But what we see very often is without the structure or support, people will start to get in there, start to crack open into a process, but because they don't feel, or they haven't had the support or resources to move through the thickly uncomfortable part, they stop there and go back, like a wave that never quite makes it to a wave, but then just kind of falls back. And so I'd be very curious to get some closer eyes in there. But the numbers compared to what they can be from what we know as practitioners aren't too stellar. That being said, hopefully no one was really harmed in there. We also know with clinical trials that a lot of things don't get reported. We saw plenty of issues in other clinical trials so far where there was very strategic ways of expressing the data and communicating the data. And I really, really hope we don't get some expose a year from now about all the things that actually went wrong in the clinical trial and then headlines saying that 5-MeO is unsafe, because that would harm the progress that those of us who really care about seeing this molecule through. I hope that.
Joel, I really appreciate you bringing that up because, and I think off camera we were speaking about this, something that always goes through my mind when I see the results of these clinical trials in the psychedelic medicine space is for the people who didn't respond or were non-responders to treatment, maybe they didn't have something that technically fits the definition of a serious adverse event, but that might not mean that they're not having a difficult time, some of them in the background. I think the space needs to do a much better job of maybe explaining some of those challenges. I think actually Beckley SciTech works with this organization called SciPan. I think that's what it's called. And they did get feedback from trial participants on what could have been done better and stuff like that. So I was happy to see that as maybe a step forward. But with that being said, I would like to bring up some points about the GH research study and warning you, some of it may sound very naive. That I'm bringing it up, and you might be like, "Oh, you don't understand 5-MeO." So apologize in advance. But there's a couple of things that I think are interesting to me. So first thing I want to bring up is, I think they're smart with their wording around it. There's no mandated psychotherapy. So, but I don't, my understanding is in that trial, if something does go wrong for whatever reason, they can schedule additional visits, even though it's technically not part of the protocol.
Hmm.
So that was something that made me think, okay, like maybe, this isn't as dangerous as some might believe. But with that being said, like what do you think about that point specifically? And I have a couple.
We've seen the "we're there if you need us" kind of
Okay.
integration support plenty. It's prevalent in the underground and continues to fail
Yeah.
over and over. One of the things that's really tough is a lot of participants won't actually report their adverse experience because they feel they inherently did something wrong, that they
Mhm.
weren't able to do it right, quote unquote, that they weren't able to surrender. And so they take that fault upon themselves. This is something that we see a lot around the world and get a lot of reports to us from. And so a lot of practitioners, do that. Hey, we're here for support if you need. Like, yeah, we have integration if you need, just reach out.
Mm,
Integration isn't reach out to us if it's getting difficult. Integration is how we take an experience that transcends the rational mind and somehow allow it to make meaningful change that lasts beyond that, 4 to 6 week or even 6 month period. So the integration we can look at as both benefit optimization as well as harm reduction. So 5-MeO is an experience that we don't have a lot of context from. It's not an experience where we've got a lot of symbolic meaning. And so a lot of times those effects can just kind of diminish very easily because there's not something from the mind to hold on to and to navigate.
I see. That was so extremely well said. Thank you so much for that. I didn't even think about a lot of those points that you brought up. That's really important to note what you just said. And here's another point where I might sound very naive, and I'm looking forward to you challenging me on this. So, and then we can maybe speak more about the different routes of administration. So, something that's always interested me about the way GH research administers the dose. And by the way, I don't even know if it's unique to them. I'm sure the reason they do it is because they see what people have been doing for at retreats, for example.
Yeah.
So I always found it interesting that, they have this individualized dosing regimen, via inhalation. It starts off at 6 milligrams. And if someone hasn't had a peak experience with, and they have different ways of measuring this, I believe, and if they feel comfortable, then they move on to the 12 milligram dose. So do you think by starting off at the 6 milligram dose, is that maybe considered a primer for higher doses? Or perhaps you might tell me that once you get to that 12 milligram, it is far different than six, and it's nothing can prepare you for that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Good question. 6 milligrams would be what we consider a medium or a hug dose terminology,
Okay.
and the handshake hug full release spectrum. 6 milligrams is a significant experience.
Okay.
We can say at a lower dose, the experience is very somatic. It is sensations in the body, but not much alteration to mental activity. When we get up to a medium dose, we are having significant somatic sensations as well as very significant changes to our mental sphere at that point. And it's usually around there where some challenges might come up there. The thing with the sub full release doses, and I'd say anything kind of under 8 milligrams, the thing there is the mind generally stays present still on those experiences. And therefore, the mind is attempting to find context and get its footing. So that 6 milligrams for first timers can be a bit disconcerting, can be a bit weird. It's something that where we work with people in a very held environment. So we've done, a lot of kind of nervous system setting beforehand, a lot of preparation beforehand, given them resources to where they may know that it may feel a little chaotic. It may feel a little uncomfortable, but it's okay, and to lean into that uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes people may halt themselves after that 6 milligrams, and I know in the GH studies, a lot of people did not make it to the further doses. This would be presumably why, as that 6 milligrams is usually where stronger resistance may come up, and the participant may be like, "Oh no, this isn't for me." There may be that immediate desire to reject the experience because something deeper is getting triggered. 12 milligrams is a full dose. 12 milligrams is the max we give a first timer.
Okay.
And understanding GH goes up to 18, which is out of this world.
Yeah. That's yeah, I know. It was interesting to see actually in the study what percent of people took six, what percent of people
Yeah.
took 12, or got up to 12 and then 18. It was that was very interesting to look at. So actually at your retreats, do you do a similar approach where you work your way up to the certain doses, or does it really depend on the person, maybe their prior experience
Yeah.
with 5-MeO or other psychedelics?
It's a very individualized process. And so
Okay.
different conditions, different things we're working into may be served better by different dosage protocols. We do have kind of set and created protocols for different kind of outcomes. However, these are still individually influenced. Some people, we're starting off at 2 to 3 milligrams and titrating up slowly. Sometimes we're starting people off in a full dose, 10 to 12 milligrams. There is no right or wrong necessarily, provided participant is in a safe place to go into a full experience right away. But during the preparatory period, we're working with them to give them all of the information around what can be expected from the different types of dosages, different types of ROAs, and allowing them to feel what feels warmer and more comfortable for them, as well as offering, if asked for, offering recommendation or advice of what we feel may be an optimal route for them.
So now that I guess we spoke, you got to share a little bit about what your thoughts on the GH research individualized dosing regimen. I'm curious to hear like your thoughts about Beckley Cytex. It's I guess BPL-003 synthetic 5-MeO DMT delivered intranasally. Now this experience lasts, and I think they're doing 12 milligrams at the high dose group. What I think that's the one they're expecting to be the most therapeutic. That
Mhm.
experience, I think, lasts around 2 hours. And with GH research, with each dose, the experience itself, I think they said on a call it lasts around 15 minutes. So, you know, just how different could that experience be with Beckley Cytex's drug compared to GH research, and like what does that profile look like potentially for
So the
people?
intranasal administration, I wouldn't say 2 hours may be like until all subjective, any minor tingling kind of goes away, stuff like that. But I
Okay.
mean, insufflation is more, I'd say 20 to 40 minutes rather than like 10 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So it is a more elongated experience. Generally, we're not going into a full state of subjective dissolution in there because of the slower onset. The mind has more time to kind of anchor itself in and adjust to the experience slowly. So usually there's still some presence of subjective self in that extended state.
Okay.
That being said, this was a method that was, really pioneered by the late Dr. Ralph Metzner. And, he and Stanislav Grof noticed that there was a lot of therapeutic benefit and potential of going into with that route of administration. That being said, 12 milligrams through insufflation, I wouldn't consider it being a high dose. Insufflation is a different dosage. If we're working in high dose with insufflation, we're usually working between 16 and 22 milligrams for a higher dose, as it does take a little bit more. But with Beckley, I would say similar. I would say I would love to see a bit more concerted effort to really understand what they don't understand.
Mhm.
A bit more intention around getting to provide the safest experience possible for participants. But I think their heads are in the right place. I
Yeah.
think I think they're coming from a good place, and I hope to see them succeed.
No, I've actually heard the same things about Beckley SciTech as well. And for the viewers who may not be aware, they are incorporating psychological support, whatever you want to call it, in the trials. So that's good to know. Um, so, Joel, I think you actually touched on a bit that you're looking into into the drug discovery area around 5-MeO DMT. Can you share anything about what you're planning or no?
I can share a little bit. We'll be opening the curtains to that project in March. So next month there will be some great announcements coming. I can say that we've been attracting an amazing team of neuroscientists, very well-known researchers, of ex-pharma and drug dev and biotech personnel, and wild, amazingly skilled chemists, compound chemists, and computational chemists, along with a very effective AI discovery platform. And our really, I would say the entire company, which we can go ahead and say is called F.I.V.E. Discovery, is really around investigating, discovering all of the various potentials of 5-MeO DMT and 5-MeO DMT derived analogs. I would say our current focus is on non-hallucinogenic aspects,
Just gonna
and
ask.
our current focus does not involve mental health, but brain health.
Okay, wow. Thank you so much. That's really cool. That's really cool to know. So I'm guessing then, because I was actually going to ask you, you might think that maybe not depression, but do you think that actually no, I will ask this. For depression, do you think that these non-hallucinogenic neuroplastogens, maybe ones based on the 5-MeO scaffold, could have some benefit for people with depression? Because I actually know I think Delix is their lead candidate, I think is based on it's a similar structure to 5-MeO, if I'm not mistaken, and it's for
Yeah.
depression. You think it has potential?
I think that's the big question, and I think it remains to be seen. I would say a lot of our colleagues would say no when it comes to the mental health aspects, but yes, more towards the we'll say neurological phenomenon. But or and Yeah, I would say a lot more investigation is needed there.
Yeah.
One of the main theories that I'm seeing, the main kind of schools of thought that I'm seeing, is that the subjective, quote unquote, mystical experience is intrinsically tied to the relief in depression and anxiety, which makes a lot of sense to us. I think that a non hallucinogenic variation can perhaps create some benefit, though. It's not to say that it will have no effect. Will the
Mhm.
effect be anywhere near the same? I don't think so. I
Yeah.
hope so. It would be pretty awesome. I mean, let's be real.
That
It
would
would
be.
be pretty great.
No, seriously, yeah, really. If you could have yeah, the effects that are seen with other psychedelics and it's in a pill and you don't have an experience or for people who don't want it, maybe that would be pretty interesting. It seems like a lot of people are coming to this conclusion that they think it's going to work, but probably not as well. But nevertheless, it can still be very valuable for
Exactly.
people to take many different cases where it might be preferred over a hallucinogenic experience. So,
Yeah.
Joel, I mean, thank you so much for coming on the channel. I've loved this discussion. I have one more question for you before this wraps up, and that is, what are you most excited about when it comes to the future of 5-MeO DMT research or the use of 5-MeO DMT? And is there anything that worries you moving forward, which I think there is, and what is that?
What excites me about the future of 5-MeO DMT research is its limitless potential. I mean, I don't like to use the term miracle or miraculous, but we've seen things that can only be described as miraculous. Like I said, we've taken a lot of cases through this center. I've been serving this medicine personally for over 10 years now and have seen things that are beyond what we can conceive. There's a lot of excitement, both for the mental health aspects, for the brain health aspects, for what this can do for the world in a time when we're all so deeply separated, in a time when we're so at odds with each other. What better than a medicine that allows us to remember how whole we really are and how connected we really are in a very palpable and real way? My fears are, as I was saying before, that a couple more bad headlines are going to significantly stunt the chances of success or the chances that this molecule has to be, of being revealed to the world in much bigger ways than it is currently now. I think I think optics are vital at this point, and I think moving slowly and pragmatically is the only way to go. And I think that's how we've been very lucky. I first started doing our seed funding round in 2020 for Kaivalya Kollectiv, or KVI, which is our parent company, and was really, actually, I started in 2019, but I was, heavily influenced or being told by a lot of investors and VCs that I was pitching to try and go for immediate drug development plans, to try and choose a molecule and go forward on that, to create a model that where we could IPO in the next 1 to 2 years, something like that. And luckily, we ended up only taking on for our seed round, only took on independent investors that have done 5-MeO before and understood the mission. This has allowed us to move very slowly, while many of the other companies in the space have Chapter 11 or gone under. But all of our companies are doing great. Tandava is doing great. F.I.V.E is doing great. We're about to bring F.I.V.E discovery out to the world in a big way, and we've got some really high hopes for it. So there's a lot of, I would say, benefits that we've been able to enjoy by moving slowly and getting to understand what this molecule can and cannot do. We've got a huge advantage by having an institute here in Mexico and by having amazing research partners at universities here as well, where we can conduct research at a minor fraction of the cost and can really understand what are our viable pathways forward. We can understand what are we going to have success with getting to preclinical status, and what may have a few more difficulties than we were expecting, because we can do so many of these preliminary studies on existing participants who are coming through here. We can do blood and saliva sampling, EEG before and afters. We've got questionnaires that go out through our HIPAA compliant platform to our participants. We've got a lot of different ways of understanding I would say, the most intelligent pathways to bring 5-MeO out to the world. And we're blessed with an amazing team. I mean, our staff at Tandava is some of the best in the world. Any of our practitioners, have more space than I'd say the entire team of choose any drug development company out there. And through F.I.V.E, I mean, our F.I.V.E team is huge. We've got, just our training program has over 40 teachers in it. And these are pioneers and experts in pharmacology and neuroscience and all the elements that are involved in 5-MeO. So our whole mission has been collaborative. It's been a stance of, hey, let's work together. This is something that can potentially change the world. Let's do this together, and let's do it in a way that really has an impact. And we're excited for it.
Super exciting. And by the way, if we do a future interview, I would love to learn more about F.I.V.E as well. There's so much to talk about. Joel, thank you so much for coming on the channel. If people want to contact you, any links to that or websites, and I'll link it down below in the comment section as well, in the description.
Yeah. For anyone who's interested in having a 5-MeO DMT experience in a world-class setting in the safest way you possibly can, please come to Tandava. It's tandavaretreats.com. And you can find us down in Tepoztlan, Mexico, one of the most beautiful places in the world. And then F.I.V.E, the website is 5-meo.education. And on there, you can find all of the information you'd ever want to know about 5-MeO DMT, all of the published research articles, links to our different training programs, all of that fun stuff. And then you can find me on LinkedIn too, and on social media.
Absolutely. Joel Brierre, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake.